everybody. Welcome back to the HealthForce podcast, ramsandelitefitness.com, ramsandelitefitness.com. So as I mentioned last week on our program, we're interviewing our third individual. And just to remind everybody about the format, no, this is not a debate. No, we are not going to yell at each other. We're going to be nice to each other. I'm going to let our guests really lay out their case as to what they do, why they do it, maybe get into some different topics of interest to them. And they're going to be the main star of the interview. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Meredith Dykstra, certified health coaching consultant with Revelation Health. Meredith, how are you this morning?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on the show, Fran.
So I'd like to start. Why don't you start by maybe explaining a little bit about what you do for a living? What really, what identifies a health coach, or kind of how that maps out into, what you do and who you kind of help.
Yeah, sure. Well, there's a lot there. But I am a certified health coach and consultant, and I work for a company called Revelation Health. It's based here in Pittsburgh, and I've been with them for almost 3 years. It'll be 3 years in February, and it's really been an incredible journey. I've been interested in health and wellness for quite a while, and I don't know how far back you want me to go, if you want the full story, or if you want me to jump in with what I do. Right. And I can. It really depends how far back we want to go.
So let's start with kind of what you do right now, a typical day in the life of Meredith. You go to work, the type of clients maybe you're working with, or the process of how you give them some benefit in their lives.
Okay, right. Well, my job for the company is very multifaceted. I wear a lot of hats. It's a small, growing company, but we've been growing rapidly. We've had a lot of amazing opportunities to connect with individuals who are changing the world. So it's my job has shifted very much so from when I was first hired at the company as the wellness consultant at the retail store versus what I do now. But I was hired almost 3 years ago to manage the retail store in Allison Park, which is a high-end supplement store. So we sell physicians-grade supplements to clients all over the world, and most of the business was online, but we wanted the opportunity to serve the Pittsburgh area. So we opened up a retail store, and it launched in October. It'll be October this past year, about 2 years ago. So I was hired to kind of help sell the supplements in the store as well as do online product support. And I have a certification in health coaching. So clients would call in and say, I have a thyroid condition. What supplements do you recommend? And things of that nature. And it progressed so I started offering my coaching services as well through the store. So if people want more in-depth product support or have health challenges that just aren't being met by a simple phone call with some basic recommendations, then we would move on and set up a coaching session. And I help clients get to the root source of what's causing their health challenges and offer supports to help them not only remove those toxic sources in their life, whether that's chemical, physical, emotional stress, and also and then give them supplemental supports as well as diet and lifestyle recommendations to implement to help upgrade their health and change their life.
I don't know if you can get better than that, folks. That's pretty awesome, right? Why don't you talk a little bit about how you first got started into this industry? So maybe think back, maybe you were fledgling in college, didn't really know what you wanted to do, and then you shifted into health and fitness. Just maybe walk us through how that developed for you personally.
Yeah, well, as for all of us with our stories, they're long stories. There's a lot of twists and turns, but in retrospect, we can see how it all works out to lead us to where we are today. So when I kind of first started getting into health and fitness, it was about 2010. And I had been living in New Orleans at the time. I had been there almost 3 years, and the lifestyle was really starting to take its toll. So the late nights, lots of alcohol, lots of questionable food, just not living a healthy lifestyle was really taking its toll on my body, and I was feeling the symptoms. Fatigue, different autoimmune challenges were arising, brain fog, just total lack of energy. And, being a 20-something, that's not normal to not wake up and spring out of bed and have great mental clarity and just feel good and positive and ready to take on the world. And that's how I wanted to feel. And I was recognizing that what I was doing to my body was not the right thing to get me to where I wanted to go in life. So I started to investigate natural health and healing, and I actually picked up a book in a Barnes & Noble. I remember it was Alicia Silverstone's book, and it was a book on macrobiotic healing and cooking. And the macrobiotic diet is very much based on eating a lot of different whole grains and small amounts of animal protein, tons of vegetables, beans, a lot of seasonal foods, fermented foods. It's very much a Japanese-based diet. And that started to kind of pique my interest in natural health and healing, and how foods could be healing to my body instead of just being something that I eat that tastes good. So I started to kind of go on that path and learning more about natural foods and cooking natural foods, and that was that spring of 2010. And I also decided I needed to leave New Orleans at that time. The environment there, and just kind of the relationships I had made, and some of the situations I had put myself in weren't conducive to living my best life, I felt. So I left New Orleans that summer and kind of came home here to Pittsburgh to kind of refigure out my life from my parents' couch. And at the time, I was also still very much into learning more and more about cooking natural foods. And I came across a natural healing center up in Massachusetts. And I was, this looks like an interesting place to go and learn. They had opportunities to volunteer in their kitchen to learn how to cook the macrobiotic foods there. And it was a minimum 1 month volunteer commitment. And I thought, I can do anything for a month. I want to go learn how to cook these foods, and I'll go up there for a month and then probably go move out west and start my next chapter and get into coaching more. So, or kind of learning more about coaching. At the time, I wasn't certified yet. So I went up to Massachusetts at this natural healing center to learn how to cook healing foods, and what was a 1 month commitment turned into almost 4 years of being up at this institute. And I went from being a kitchen volunteer to taking over the front desk and eventually taking over the programs. And it was an incredible, interesting chapter in my life where I learned so much about how foods affect the body, and how also important it is to account for the seasons and the emotional component to healing. And just looking at health in a lot of different aspects, and how it's not just the food we eat that affects our life, but everything in our environment is food. So it's just everything, our thoughts, the food we eat, the physical activities that we do, everything has a major impact on our health. And it just kind of really opened my eyes to everything that I was doing and the thoughts I was thinking, and everything that was just that I was choosing to put into my body and into my brain, how that affected my results. So it was an incredible time up in Massachusetts at the center. But after quite a few years as well, I felt the Spirit was leading me in a different direction, and that it was time for me to leave and kind of move on to the next chapter of my life and use all this information and these tools that I learned to impact others in another area and have God use me in a bigger way. Very much in my belief system. So it'll be 3 years ago this Christmas, I came home and left Massachusetts, packed up my car, ended the job, ended a relationship that I felt was no longer serving me, and was planning to move out west. And my mom gets diagnosed with cancer. So I kind of stopped, and my plans got a little ruffled, because I was so on fire at that point for just coming home and taking all this information that I had learned and implementing it in the world. And also, by the way, at the time, while I was up in Massachusetts, I got certified as a health coaching consultant. So I completed my certification, and I was ready to take that to the next level and really start to coach people, because I had all this information. There was a lot of input, but there wasn't the output that was happening. I hadn't really started to coach people privately. It was just more so for my knowledge than anything else. But I felt like, okay, now it's time to take some action. I can't just keep sucking in all this information without putting it out for the world. So I came home 3 years ago, and my mom gets the diagnosis, and I say, okay, God, like, what do you have for me here? I felt like it was really a calling for me to kind of stay in Pittsburgh and open my eyes to the opportunities that were happening here. So, and I also felt a calling to help my family. I have all this amazing health information, and my mom's sick. Right. So this is part of my mission and duty, is to be here and commit to my family to help them in their health journey.
I think it's a perfect segue. my mother was also diagnosed with cancer back when I was 17 years old. Now that experience was something, most 17-year-olds hopefully don't have to go through anything like that. My mother actually passed away within 4 months of diagnosis, stage 4 colon cancer. By the time you get that, usually by the time symptoms show, it's in the liver. It's elsewhere, and you're in trouble quickly with that. I'd like to segue into the mental aspect that you mentioned earlier. It's emotional. There's a lot to it besides just physical. And
so much.
I'm going to do a shameless plug. We have our YouTube series. Make sure you guys watch it. Mental Nutrition. Just started it. Episode 2. Take 3 minutes of your day, watch it, and implement your action step. How do you think emotions and mental well-being plays into fighting disease? So something like cancer. How important is it for somebody to have a positive mindset or to feel healthy emotionally when they're trying to take on something that is a physical disease as well as some other aspects in there?
Fran, I think it's massive. Bruce Lipton, who is a very famous researcher in a cellular biologist, and he wrote the book called The Biology of Belief. We actually interviewed him recently on our podcast, which is called Cellular Healing TV. Shameless plug, check it out. And it was an incredible episode, and he found in his research that our thoughts can actually create cellular inflammation, therefore driving disease ultimately, because inflammation is at the root of many, many diseases that we have in our modern world. So I think that the thoughts that we think and the mindset that we have has a massive impact on our results. And that's true of every area of our life: health, fitness, relationships. What we think and our mindset can change everything. So huge.
Right, and my experiences have concurred that. Everything from, just to give a little bit of background about me, when I started my business, I had $200 in the bank account. I didn't want to work where I was anymore, and I quit. Just cold turkey, no other options. It was literally fight or flight for me.
Wow.
And for me, I give a lot of props to my mental approach at the time. It was positive all the way. It was always, it'll work out. I don't know how. I'll make it happen. And I didn't miss 1 month of bills or anything. It just took off, and I credit a lot to that. So for the people listening, I would say the average person does have, every single person struggles with negative things that come up. All right? Every single person has them. What, do you have maybe a tip or two handy right now that you can give somebody who, to try to help them reverse any negative thoughts that come up, or if somebody is listening and they always feel not depressed, but they're always down, that they feel like they can't succeed. Do you have a tip or two to help them with that mental side? Because they can find stuff for physical online. Most people can find physical stuff. The mental stuff is it's hard to find information. Do you have any tips?
It is. It's a huge area that we're only just kind of scratching the surface on and beginning to talk more about, which is exciting. For me personally, my faith and the spiritual component to healing is really foundational for me. So as a Christian, I go back to the Bible, to the Word of God, and that has spoken a lot of healing into my life, as well as being connected with fellow believers who lift me up, who offer spiritual guidance when I feel that brokenness and the challenges, and just helping me to have right eyes to see situations for what they are, and recognizing a lot of these challenges as spiritual warfare. So personally, connecting, going back to the Word of God, reading Scripture, counseling for, faith-based counseling for me has been helpful. And there's some other tools as well that, can be helpful. Something called EMDR, eye movement rapidization, and what is that last R? It's a type of therapy, and I haven't investigated it in depth, but it's a type of therapy, and there are EMDR certified specialists all over the country. So you can look it up online on their website. You just type in your zip code and you can pull them up. There's a number in the Pittsburgh area who teach this type of therapy, but it focuses on healing childhood traumas, and so much of our adult life and the emotional wounds that we have are deeply rooted in childhood. So I think going back and really investigating, digging into the root cause of these wrong thoughts that we have, and EMDR therapy can be a really helpful tool for a lot of people. There's also something called the emotional freedom technique, or tapping as it's more widely known, wherein you literally tap using your hands on specific points all over your body, kind of connected to traditional Chinese medicine, and you're speaking positive affirmations while you're doing these tappings, and it can actually reroute energy in your body to kind of mitigate some of the damaging thoughts that you have and refocus that energy on these positive thoughts, and how they can kind of be more connected to positive thoughts and then having positive results with your health. So we did a show on it on EFT, so check that out on Cellular Healing TV if you want kind of more in-depth information. And I don't know if I explained that very well, but there's definitely a lot of videos you can watch on how to do tapping at home, and you're basically just tapping these points to reroute the energy in your body.
I've got a secret. I just watched a video last night to do a tapping. Kid you not.
There you go.
First time I've ever seen it in my entire life. And it took me probably 20 seconds to like get past the whole, what is she doing, right?
Right.
You got
Looks
kind
a little odd.
It does, right? And so my girlfriend was having stomach pains last night, and we were doing, I even did this thing called a spinal rub or something. You ever hear that? It's, but I just watched the video about the tapping thing. And tapping the forehead, tapping the cheeks, tapping the chin.
Right.
And so I actually didn't do that with her, but I watched it at least. And she ended up falling asleep, so maybe just hearing that person, it worked. Who knows?
Yeah. Reiki is another energy healing, brainwave optimization. There's a lot of different therapies that you can use to change your brain waves. And neurolinguistic programming is also very powerful to change your thoughts into positive thoughts and to reframe. So there's so many tools.
Do you think something like yoga can transition into this mental well-being, emotional well-being, energy thing? I'm not the biggest yogi out there. I've done it in the past, and it's increased my flexibility. So from that end, I can certainly speak to yoga. But I haven't done I don't know the different types of flow or an energy, or there's different spots, the third eye and all that. I haven't done that. Is that something that you think can also be beneficial? Something like a yoga? For
sure. And many people find that yoga has massive positive impact on their life, because it's not just the spiritual component, which I think many more men are interested in that getting physically ripped with yoga, because you can. It's much more challenging than it looks like. But the spiritual component of yoga, for a lot of people, is way more important than the physical component. So yes, another awesome tool.
Good. Going back to that diet, the macrobiotic diet, is that something that you still follow today, or is your positions kind of changed and evolved over since first getting into the industry?
No, it's changed a lot, and it's continuing to change. Even what I eat today may be different than last week. I'm constantly learning and growing and delving into the cutting edge research on food and nutrition, but also trying to see it from a larger historical perspective and what makes sense for human beings to eat. But yeah, the transition changed a lot when I came back to Pittsburgh and started working for Revelation Health and learning all of this information about food and healing and diet that we kind of follow and prescribe for those now. And when I was eating the macrobiotic diet, which is mostly composed of grains, I said I was eating brown rice for breakfast in the morning, quinoa for lunch, buckwheat for dinner, constant grains, which I now see in retrospect and have learned that when I was eating so many grains and so many carbohydrates, I was constantly spiking my blood sugar. My glucose and insulin were up and down all day, roller coaster, and that was actually creating cellular inflammation, which for me was not giving me the right results and the results that I wanted. So no, actually it's quite funny. I do things different, and I don't want to say that it's the opposite now, because there are still quite a few macrobiotic principles that I think are really valid and I've maintained, but now I rarely eat grains. I follow kind of what we call the cellular healing diet, where I've removed grains for the most part, and removed toxic fats. So that's the GMO corn oils, soybean oils, anything that's fried, that oil in a fryer at a restaurant. So many of the oils out there are bad news because they create cellular inflammation. Our cell membranes are made of fat, and we need good fat for our cell membranes to function well. And our cell membranes are vital to our health, because if our cell membranes aren't functioning properly and they're inflamed, the good things can't get into our cells and the bad things can't get out. So having healthy cell membranes is key. And how we build healthy cell membranes, one component anyway, is with good dietary fats. So I've shifted over, and I actually eat a massive amount of fat, and especially saturated fat, which, of course, cholesterol and saturated fat are the two most vilified fats in, the history of America. And now I eat a massive amount of these fats, and it's totally changed my health. And not only impacting, my overall cellular health, but helping to increase my brain function as well, and making me feel better, and helping to decrease inflammation in my body, and all these things that the good fats can do. So I've removed the grains a lot, but I still enjoy a lot of fermented foods that the macrobiotic diet prescribes, as well as eating seasonally. And focusing on digestion is also a big part of it. So, definitely some principles have carried over, but what I do now is quite different. And I eat a lot more animal protein than I did in the past, and not overdoing it for sure. I'd say my diet is more so a high-fat, moderate protein, lower carbohydrate diet, although those ratios kind of change, and we vary it depending on the season and just how I feel that day. And I incorporate fasting, and I experiment a lot with the ketogenic diet, but bring in feasting and fasting cycles to kind of trigger the body's adaptation mechanism. And because when we force the body to adapt with that good stress, then we actually become healthier, because our good cells adapt, but the bad cells don't.
So, a quick history lesson for you out there. If you've watched some of my videos or the podcast, you may be familiar to what Meredith speaks about in terms of the fat. There has been the fat has been viewed as like a villain, right? 80s and 90s, the government came out and wanted to make fat the villain. Then we got that's where we got the high sugar. Yeah, so
low fat everything.
So we got low fat and fat free this, but then the sugar was high in different foods, and that caused a series of issues that we won't discuss today. But we have talked about in the past. So I wanted to definitely talk about this cellular inflammation a little bit. Are there signs or symptoms that individuals have if they have this going on to a problematic extent? So maybe when they come into your store, they come for your services, are there certain qualities or symptoms that they're able to make you aware of, that you're like, oh, yeah, this is probably a problem for you. We should look into that. Is there a common theme?
Right. Yeah. Well, we definitely have a little questionnaire when you come in, and we offer free evaluations. And there's kind of a symptoms checklist that we kind of break it down by category to alert people that, yes, you do have cellular inflammation. And we also have tests that we offer as well for that. And I can talk a little bit more about that. But signs of inflammation manifest in many different ways. And the problem is that most people think about inflammation in terms of acute inflammation today, where, they hit their elbow and there's redness and swelling. So that's one type of inflammation, but that's acute inflammation, wherein it's happening immediately and it will go away after the body has executed the healing. However, what we're talking about with the problems with inflammation is the chronic inflammation, wherein people have had this inflammation going on at the cellular level for years, often decades, and aren't recognizing their symptoms as being inflammation at the cellular level. So an inflammation can manifest in many different ways, as brain fog, as total fatigue and lack of energy, as different skin challenges, as hair loss, and a lot of these physical symptoms are actually inflammation at the cellular level, and they look so different for everyone. But there are very many common themes, common symptoms that all are kind of rooted in this inflammatory process going on in the body that's chronically being triggered by the foods that they eat, the lifestyle habits, and the thoughts that they think.
So, it's not a devil's advocate question, but is it challenging to, if the individual is, if they have a hard time noticing this, the symptoms themselves of inflammation, and maybe I would argue most people probably don't know the signs of inflammation anyways. I think that's something that there's still education to be had. Does it make it hard on you as a health coach to then try to identify what's really inflammation? So, for instance, fatigue versus maybe they just didn't sleep enough that night. Is it hard to try to distinguish, or are there patterns that sort of emerge or help you get to the right answer?
Mm-hmm. Well, it definitely comes with experience, of course, and seeing patterns over time. But at this point, since I've been in the industry for quite a few years, and I see the patterns, that it's not hard to see. Of course, if someone doesn't sleep well, then they're going to be tired the next day, most likely, depending on other factors. But, in general, when you see these chronic patterns where it's happening consistently over a period of time, that's when you really have to look at, okay, what's the root source of this? This isn't a one-night, short-term situation. This is a pattern that's been happening over years and decades.
Atkins diet. A fan of it or not a fan of it? I know you mentioned lower carb, higher fat. There's obviously some principles that cross over there. Fan or no fan?
I'd say not a fan. And I think Atkins, did a lot of good things as far as waking people up to the massive implications that a really high processed carbohydrate diet can have on the system, with spiking our blood glucose and insulin, which also roots back and creates cellular inflammation. However, the Atkins diet is a high protein diet. And there's a number of problems with eating too much protein. So we advocate a higher fat, which is of course the good fat, not the toxic fat, moderate protein, lower carbohydrate diet, and that ratio is very important because when we have too much protein in our system and eat too much of it, something called gluconeogenesis can occur. And basically, in layman's terms, that means that you're eating too much protein in your system, your body doesn't know what to do with it, so it shifts the protein molecules over from being protein to being sugar. And because they're not, or glucose for gluconeogenesis, so the protein shifted over into glucose, and if it's not used as energy, it gets stored as fat. So you can actually end up gaining weight and creating cellular inflammation if you're consuming a super high protein diet. And a lot of bodybuilders out there, people, in the health and wellness industry, or, just who are big followers of it, eat massive amounts of protein, and it's really actually doing more harm than good.
Is there a level that's too high, or is there a percentage of body weight? How do you find that line of too much protein versus moderate protein? Is there something that you follow?
Right. We have loose guidelines. Of course, it's going to be a little bit different for everyone. There's always tweaks depending on bio-individuality, personal situations, pregnancy, age, gender, ancestry. However, for the most part, we suggest typically about half of your body weight in grams would be kind of a general number to shoot for. So, if you're 150 pounds, shooting for about 75 grams of protein or so, would be reasonable. Perhaps a little bit more if you're doing, really hard workouts, lifting a lot of weights, or a little bit less if you're really not working out that much and just aren't expending a lot of energy.
How do you feel about the classic saying, a calorie is a calorie, doesn't matter necessarily if it's carbohydrate, fat, or protein? So before, if you're mentioning the gluconeogenesis and how protein can be shifted into carbohydrate and essentially then stored, is there, do you believe in levels for each individual that if they eat above a certain amount of calories, that it automatically means they gain weight, and as long as they eat below it, they automatically lose weight, or is it a little more complicated than that?
Yeah, I don't like to focus on calories anymore, but also a calorie is not a calorie. For years, I used to count calories and weigh myself every morning and be very, very focused on the numbers. And of course, numbers are important guidelines when you're kind of beginning your health journey and kind of learning how to have a framework for what you do. However, let's stop and think here. Is 1,000 calories of French fries giving you the same health benefit as 1,000 calories of broccoli? Let's be honest, no. However, did our ancestors even know what a calorie is? No. So I think we need to kind of tune in to the innate intelligence of our bodies and that wisdom that's within us to kind of guide us as far as hunger levels and tuning into the amount of food that we need to be eating. So I don't think that people need to necessarily shoot for a specific amount of calories every day as far as being under or over, but there's a lot of tweaks that are made with that too, and it takes a process to be able to kind of trust your body though as well. If you are what we call a sugar burner, which 99% of Americans are, wherein they're relying on those exogenous forms of glucose, aka carbohydrates, in their diet to fuel their energy, then you can't really trust your cravings because your hormones aren't functioning properly. So those cravings for, sugar and candy and eating constantly can't be trusted. However, when you transition over from being a sugar burner to a fat burner, wherein your body is using your own fat for fuel, and you can go for hours and hours without eating and be fine and have, great energy and balanced blood sugar, then that's a whole other story, and those cravings can be trusted. So very, very different. And once you kind of get your body in alignment where your body's burning your own fat, or you're fat adapted, as we say, and you can trust what your body is telling you to eat and do and when to eat, then you can trust those cravings and kind of make healthy decisions.
So even for myself, I've experimented with almost every diet out there. I feel like it's my duty. It's my duty. If I'm going to be in this industry as a health professional, I can't. To me, it's a personal thing where if I'm talking about a certain subject or topic, I want to have had the knowledge and experience to actually be able to speak intelligently about it. So, right. For instance, okay, you mentioned people come in, they're used to running off carbohydrate, which is true. Most people have higher carbohydrate diets. If you look at the average population, most people are not on a ketogenic type of diet. So if a client comes to you, let's say that they're having a typical diet, higher carbohydrate, lower protein, lower fat, is it, as a first step, is it beneficial, or is it more beneficial to get them onto a diet where they are maybe going lower carbohydrate, higher fat, so that maybe they're shifting towards burning ketones instead of carbohydrate as fuel? Or do you find the first step is to just work on their diet as is and maybe just balance it to healthy before making that transition? How do you weigh those two first step options, I suppose?
Mm-hmm. I like to meet people where they are, and honestly, most of the people that I work with already come into our sessions having a lot of knowledge. They may already be on, a paleo-type diet or a ketogenic diet and just aren't getting results. That's a whole other conversation, because a lot of the people that we work with have a lot of toxicity issues, so heavy metals, mold exposure, Lyme, a lot of different health challenges, adrenal fatigue, where they're doing all these right things and still not getting results. That's kind of more the population demographic that I work with. However, if I were to coach someone who is currently on the standard American diet and wants to move forward and become a fat burner, then we like to start slowly and not overwhelm the body. So most Americans, as we kind of talked about as well, are sugar burners, and they're eating many, many times a day. I recently read a study that showed that most Americans literally eat about 18 times a day. But we don't count these times as feedings, as meals. Right. We'll have a handful of nuts here, a candy bar there, half a smoothie,
don't forget liquids.
Candy,
don't forget liquids.
Liquids, kombucha, all these different things. We're constantly putting calories into our body and overwhelming our system. And by doing this, we're constantly spiking our blood sugar and our insulin. So we're just on this roller coaster of energy, up and down, crashing, and you feel terrible all day. Your energy isn't consistent, you can't think well, and you're just all over the place. And most people can relate and experience this. So if someone were to come to me for coaching and being on the standard American diet, we literally start with, all right, you are going to now eat 3 square meals a day, no snacks. And that can be a very big struggle for a lot of people. Just getting down, they have just don't realize how much they're eating. Right. So when you shift it down into breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and just possibly increasing their good fat, that can be a massive challenge for people, and really take some time to get into that system where they're not eating every time that they're hungry. And it can be very uncomfortable. But that's kind of a place where we start with diet. And after they've mastered that and only are eating 3 meals a day, then we kind of shift over and work on diet changes, increase the fasting window, possibly to 14, 16, 18, 20 hours, where they're just eating like a smaller late lunch, skipping breakfast, and having a larger satisfying dinner, so their body doesn't think that it's starving. And that's kind of where a lot of the magic happens when we bring in intermittent fasting, and that's something we call an ancient healing strategy that we implement with all of our clients once they're ready for that.
I think I wanted to touch upon brain fog a little bit, okay, and at least to how I understand it. So if an individual is used to a carbohydrate type of diet and they switch over to a higher fat diet, is brain fog that transition period where maybe their bodies is trying to change the source of fuel? Is that correct? Is that a correct understanding of that?
Right. Yes. Brain fog is so common, and actually it can get worse for a while when people are transitioning because they can feel just like crap, really sick. And especially when we're transitioning from sugar burner to fat burner and have somebody on a ketogenic diet, something called the keto flu can occur where they literally feel nausea and weakness and massive brain fog and all of these really uncomfortable symptoms as their body kind of transitions over. And the body's like, hey, where's all that sugar that you usually give me all the time? Where are the carbs? I need this for energy. And the body doesn't really know what to do for a period of time for an energy source. So it can really be very uncomfortable for a lot of people, and that's why we call it the keto flu. But once you kind of transition over into that, and for men, sometimes it can take a few weeks to transition over from being a sugar burner to a fat burner. For women, it can take months because our hormones are so different, and there's a lot of variables, especially when we're getting into perimenopause, postmenopause, those hormonal shifts that occur later in life for women, that it can be much more difficult to shift over and become keto adapted. But once you do become keto adapted and your body learns how to use your own fat for fuel, your liver produces something called ketone bodies, which are a byproduct of fat metabolism. And they're definitely the preferred source of fuel for the brain. The brain loves ketones. And actually the origins of the ketogenic diet, just to kind of have a side note here, was that it was originated in the 1920s, and researchers were using this diet in the lab, and they put children on the ketogenic diet who had epilepsy because they started to realize the impact that naturally produced ketones have on the brain and how effective it is for treating brain conditions. So any client with any brain condition who we work with, always go put them into ketosis, put them on the ketogenic diet because the brain loves ketones and it starts to work better. So yes, uncomfortable period with the keto flu, but once you transition over, the body's using your ketones for fuel, the brain fog can disappear or at least dramatically decrease, and you can really start to think better and feel better.
Hypothetically, if an opponent to this sort of lifestyle or diet were to say something like, Meredith, the ketone flu is because your body doesn't want to run off fat. It likes the carbohydrates. Listen to the body. It's what it wants. How would you respond to something like that if you were to hear that?
Yeah, well, I say let's look at the human body from a historical standpoint. For thousands of years, our ancestors ran off of ketones for fuel. Do you think that our ancestors sat down to 3 square meals a day and multiple snacks and were eating constantly? No. They would oftentimes maybe just eat 1 meal a day. So to think and say that our bodies can't run off of ketones for fuel and that it's not natural is a total lie, because that's been the history of the human race up until more recent years, where we have constant food at our fingertips and we're eating constantly, and our bodies have been sadly retrained to be reliant on these carbohydrates for fuel. But if you look at our ancestors and pretty much the entire human race up until more recent years, our bodies were trained to be in ketosis most of the time, especially in the winter time. They didn't have access to even healthy carbs and produce. They weren't able to eat, wild blueberries in the winter like we do, or mangoes, or even, some of these healthier foods that we eat. So our ancestors were in ketosis most of the time during the winter. They were eating mostly animal food and fat and just things that they could store and can and kind of eat over the winter until, the seasons changed, sun came out, and plants grew that they could eat for carbohydrates. So, and that's why we kind of talk a lot about something called diet variation, wherein we are not eating the same diet every day, 365 days a year. We are playing on the body's adaptation response, and by shifting our diet regularly, we force our cells to adapt, which is a healthy stress. And like I said before too, the good cells adapt, the bad cells don't. And by forcing our body to adapt, then we become healthier. And that's not only true with diet, but as you know, with exercise as well, is that we can't do the same workout every day and expect progressive and increased results. We have to mix it up. And the same is true with diet.
I'd like to have one more question about nutrition. This is a fascinating conversation. I think there's a wealth of information that we're discussing here. Intermittent fasting. Right? So I'm currently on an intermittent fasting type of regimen. I only limit myself to feeding for 8 hours a day, which means the rest of the 24 hours I am consuming nothing. Not a single calorie. So if something has a calorie in it, I can't consume it.
Just water?
Water. primarily water.
No coffee, no other liquids?
Coffee, I usually don't like black coffee. It depends. But anything that doesn't have calories in it, tea, so caffeine is allowed, currently what I'm doing. How do you typically walk a client through your process for intermittent fasting? It may be different, maybe the same. Just kind of branch off into that a little bit for me.
Right. Well, and my answer is that it looks different for everyone. Some people can literally intermittent fast 20 hours a day, where they might just only eat between 4 p.m. and 8 p.m. every day, and the rest of the time they're just doing water or black coffee or maybe some drinks with some fat in them just to balance blood sugar. Others can't do that, and especially a lot of women can't fast for that long. So some people can only do 14, 16-hour fasts where they're just skipping breakfast but maybe eating between noon and 8 p.m. or 11 and 7 p.m. and that works better for people. So you have to experiment and find what works for you. And honestly, what may work for you right now, Fran, for example, eating within an 8-hour time window may be very different next year because our hormones change. As we age, there's so many different variables in our life. Maybe in more stressful times emotionally in our life, we can't be putting that physical stress on our body as much because it can't handle it as well. So we need to eat and have feedings, as we sell them, which sounds so clinical, but feedings within longer time periods where maybe we only eat between 11 and 8 p.m., but we need that kind of increased fasting window just to be more gentle on our bodies. So it looks different for everyone. Gender and age definitely play big roles, and physical activity level as well plays a huge role in fasting and the results you're getting. But the answer is variation.
Changing gears, the retail store, is that something you're still active in right now?
So I am available in the retail store for in-store consultations for those who are in the Pittsburgh area and wanted to set up something in person. Then I can definitely be in the store and be available for a live in-person coaching session. But I'm kind of in and out a little bit more so now. I do work remotely, so I'm part-time from home because I do a lot of content creation as well. And I find just what works for me is just to have a quiet space where I can write and focus. And a busy office isn't often conducive to
Amen.
that. So I'm part-time from home, part-time at the office, but I can always make myself available if someone wanted to meet in person and talk supplements, get a free health evaluation, or set up a private coaching session.
At the retail store, are there maybe one or two supplements that are like the big sellers or the most commonly purchased?
Yes. What we specialize in is cellular detoxification. And we say, real detox, cellular detoxification, because it's not your 10-day juice cleanse or your bottle of chlorella tablets or a colonic. Those are all, great forms of downstream detox, we say. But to really get to the cellular level, you need to have a different approach to detoxification, and that's why we call it cellular detox. And there's a very specific process that we go through to achieve cellular detox, and it goes back to looking at the cell, fixing cellular dysfunction. We look at supporting downstream detox pathways like the liver, kidneys, gut, lymphatic system to make sure that those toxins are moving out as we do, go through the detox. And we incorporate a specific product called Cytodetox, which is a true binding agent, which contains hydrolyzed clinoctillolite fragments, which are a derivative of zeolite. So if you've heard of a zeolite out there, it's a rock. It's a totally natural mineral that's been on the earth since the beginning of time, and it's kind of what we call nature's detoxifier. And the zeolite rock attaches to toxins in its environment and kind of sucks them out of the body or out of its environment and helps to move them out of the body so that they can be removed from the cellular level. And we have a product called Cytodetox that is a zeolite-based product that we use as a true binding agent within the true cellular detox process to move those toxins out. Along with the other supports that we're doing, we're adding in the downstream detox supports. We're fixing cellular dysfunction so the cells can actually function properly so the toxins can indeed move out. And it's that 3-step process that people go through to achieve true cellular detox. And it happens over time. We do it in phases where we prepare the body for detox in phase 1. We start to move out the toxins in the body in phase 2. And then in phase 3, we start to move out the toxins in the brain, or the neurotoxins. And that's when we say is where the magic happens. And neurotoxicity is driving massive amounts of inflammation for most people today. It's why they can't think, why their bodies aren't working properly. because their brains aren't working, because they're toxic. And a huge piece of what we do is help to move out toxins from the brain. And it's a really incredible process. And we see results in people like never before, because everything that they do, in a lot of ways before, most people have not gotten to the brain to move out those toxins. And that's where you really get the results.
I'd like to play a little game with you here. Quick hitters, all right? Anywhere from a one-sentence answer, 30 seconds or so for each one, all right?
Rapid fire.
Yeah,
I like it.
Some may
All
be
right.
applicable. Some you might find, maybe you're not an expert in, you don't want to, make too much of a statement on. That's fine. Let's start off. A multivitamin.
Most multivitamins out there are total junk. They don't get absorbed in the system. They go right through your body. They end up coming out in your waste. And some of them can even do more damage than good. So I say we do have a multivitamin, but I don't even want to call it that at the store. It's the only Whole Foods-based multivitamin on the market. It has two components, capsules that have water-soluble vitamins and a liquid that has fat-soluble vitamins, and it kind of covers all the bases to give you real nutrition if you have those gaps in your diet. But for the most part, if you're eating a super balanced diet and bringing in the right supplements, doing proper detox, you don't always need that multivitamin.
Fish oil.
Most people who take fish oil today are locked in omega-3 dominance, where they're taking massive amounts of fish oil and getting inflammation from it, because our cell membranes have to have the proper ratio of omega-3 to 6 fatty acids. And when you take too much fish oil, that can throw you into omega-3 dominance and create problems.
Egg yolks.
We need them. So many people just eat egg white omelets, but the yolk is where all the nutrition lies in the egg. So eat those omelets. Get that good saturated fat and cholesterol. It's vital to cellular health.
Just to follow up on that one, you'd be surprised some of the stuff you can find on YouTube. I just did a podcast on egg yolks because there was a gentleman on YouTube who said, "Throw them away. They are bad nutritional value," was his quote. So there you go, folks.
Got to be the good quality egg yolks from pastured organic chickens, those factory farmed eggs. In general, this have a problem, but always eat the yolk.
Soy.
Mixed feelings on soy. I used to eat a ton of soy, and there's a lot of phytoestrogens in soy that can mimic estrogen in the body. For those who have hormone challenges, excess soy can definitely pose a problem. If you're going to eat soy, I'd say eat it in small amounts and make sure that it's GMO free, that it's not genetically modified, and fermented as well. So that would be in the form of tempeh, for instance, or natto, things of that nature.
Artificial sweeteners.
Bad news bears. Terrible. Stay away from them at all costs. They are horrible for your brain and really confuse the body, and are totally toxic to the system.
Gluten.
So the gluten-free rage has blown up today, and it's good in a lot of ways because people feel better when they remove gluten from their diet. But the problem with gluten is that it's genetically modified, and the gluten of today is not the gluten of yesteryear that our grandparents used to eat. And we wonder why so many people have gluten issues today or food allergies. Well, it's because our guts are destroyed from many different factors. Don't have time to get into that. But also because the gluten that we eat today has a much higher level of this gluten protein in it that our bodies don't know how to handle it, and it's also been genetically modified. So, or the wheat has been genetically modified, so our bodies just don't know how to process these GMOs, so we, get inflammation, get all these gut issues, these symptoms. So you may feel better on a gluten-free diet, but once you get your body detoxed and healthy and your gut fixed, then you might be able to bring in some ancient grains and glutinous grains that are prepared properly, where they're soaked and sprouted, and you would be able to eat them.
Last one for you. How about a probiotic supplement? Take it in a capsule form as, colonies of bacteria for your gut.
Well, probiotics are vital. However, most people are taking the same probiotic for months, if not years, and what happens when you're taking the same bacteria day in, day out, it creates something called a monoculture in your gut, where there's no diversity. And our guts need to have diverse flora to be healthy. And that's why our ancestors ate a variety of fermented foods. And they didn't pop a probiotic capsule. They were just eating, this variety. And they weren't washing their vegetables. So they were getting that, those good soil-based organisms from the dirt on their foods. So taking a probiotic, yes, but rotate it if you're going to take it. Finish off your probiotic bottle right now, switch to a different one the next month, and then a different one the next month. The rotation is key for gut diversity and then gut health.
Do they make probiotics where it's almost built like a multivitamin, where they try to put different strains into one capsule to try to avoid that, or most just sell one strain and then that's the end of it?
Well, many probiotics have many different strains of bacteria in it, but you still can't take the same one because you're still getting the same variety of bacteria. So you have to eat the variety of fermented foods. You have to switch up your probiotics.
I'd like to ask you a last question. In terms of your wellness coaching services and stuff like that, what would you say is the one thing that might separate you from every other health coach out there, or anybody else that wants to offer online consulting to try to better someone's health and fitness online or through phone or even in person? Kind of what separates you out, and what makes you feel like you have something unique to offer everybody?
Well, I feel like what makes me different is that I get to the root source of what's causing people's health challenges and help them see it for what it is and help remove it, along with adding in all these other supports with diet shifts, with lifestyle shifts, with the emotional, mindset shifts. That's what gets results. And we call it a multi-therapeutic approach because it's never one thing that gets people well. You can have the perfect diet and not be well. You can exercise in the right way and not get well. It's not a magic pill, it's a magic process. And that's what we walk people through, and we teach them how to do it and implement these strategies. So once we're finished with the coaching, they can do it for the rest of their life.
Go ahead and give the audience, if they're looking for more information, or some of this conversation has stimulated their thought process, where could they go for more information about you, who you work for, that retail store? Go ahead and give us some information, social media, internet, the grand disclosure of information.
Okay, well, a lot of websites here. So for the store, if you're interested in ordering supplements, it's revelationhealth.com. And the doctor who I work for, who's the lead doctor for our company, he's now based in Utah, but his website has tons of incredible articles with information, and that's drpompa.com. So that's drpompa.com for articles. I also have a personal blog where I do a lot of my recipes, and that's coachmeredith.blogspot.com. And I also have a Facebook fan page, Meredith Dykstra Health Coaching, and I'm on Instagram, Meredith Dykstra Health Coaching, and I have some YouTube videos up on my Meredith Dykstra Health Coaching page, and reach out. And you can reach me, Meredith, at revelationhealth.com is an email if you're interested in coaching, or you can call into the store. It's 888-600-0642, and I'm happy to speak with you on the phone about our services.
So Meredith, I want to thank you for coming on the program. I think we've had a very robust conversation about things, and I always feel when I get done with an interview, there's so much left on the table still, especially when it's a good interview and there's a lot of conversation and a lot of ideas being exchanged. So, as always, I'd like to remind the audience, you're free to make up your mind on all the issues discussed today, one way or another. That's what we're here for. We're here just to generate conversation. It's not always about convincing and persuading. I think sometimes individuals can get too wrapped up into that. Instead, I think it's best that we let people follow the information, follow the facts, let them weed through different things, and and conversation can never hurt, regardless of how you fall on that side.
Amen. One more thing. I forgot to plug our podcast as well. So I host the podcast with our doctor called Cellular Healing TV, and loaded with information. We have so much fun on there, and if you like any of the things that we talked about today, then delve into our podcast. You can download it, check it out on iTunes or on social media, and I think you'll really like a lot of the information that we have there as well. So thanks, Fran. Wanted to get that in.
Absolutely. That's what we're all about. So hope you guys enjoyed the program. Lots of information. Again, feel free to follow up on all that information that Meredith laid out, all the websites. You can fill yourself all the way up to the brim on information, I'm sure. Next week, we might head into some different arenas for topics of conversation for the podcast. In the meantime, make sure to check out all of our social media, Rams and Elite Fitness, Facebook, Instagram, and then our YouTube page, Rams and Elite Fitness. Thank you all, and I will see you next week.